Insomniac Games has been a quite simply incredible game studio for the PlayStation 5. Already through this generation, there's been 3 distinct game releases that have led the way for the rest of PlayStation studios to follow. And now everything has been upgraded for PlayStation 5 Pro, patching support back in for these 3 eras of games. Let's start at the top with the first effort, which was Spider-Man Miles Morales. This was a smaller game between the main numbered games in the superhero series, and actually a cross-gen release as well. This was an upgrade to the late PS4 era game engine from Spider-Man, and heck, they also remastered that game as well in the process. And they slotted in ray tracing effects to showcase just a little bit of what the PS5 could do over the PS4 in that department, and with the ray traced reflections really helping to capture the essence of New York City's many glass-clad skyscrapers. At launch, it had 2 distinct modes, 30 FPS with ray tracing and 60 FPS without, but they quickly dipped back in to update their engine and share the progress with players, introducing both a 40 FPS mode for people with 120Hz screens, without sacrificing any of the fidelity of the 30 FPS mode, as well as a somewhat cut down performance RT mode that had lower quality ray tracing but kept the overarching effect intact and did so at a 60 FPS. The main trade-off from fidelity to performance RT was that drop from a 4K target to 1440p, and with effects quality at lower resolutions and lower densities for things like cars and pedestrians as well. PS5 Pro now has a straightforward Performance Pro graphics mode, and it's easy to recommend. This aims to get the full fat fidelity mode at 60 FPS, but it has to use PSSR to get there. It comes with all of the ray tracing features enabled though. Essentially, I would expect that, without doing any pixel peeping, it's lifting the framerate cap on fidelity mode, and is just accepting a possibly wider dynamic resolution when that is needed. It looks pretty great as a straightforward upgrade, though it's not really adding too much, given just how good performance RT already is for most people. And so we'll move on to Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and this is a somewhat different story. This game might have arrived only about half a year after the PS5's launch, but it was a massive showcase for both ray tracing and the PS5 SSD for all of the level transitions. Miles Morales was nice as a little test demo, but this was the first full-fat PS5 full-on exclusive for many people. Again, at launch it had a 30 FPS ray tracing mode and 60 FPS without, and again it got the same 40 FPS mode and performance RT mode sometime after launch. And once again, performance RT really is now the go-to for most people, even if the 30 FPS gameplay here works really well and feels really good in fidelity mode. There's a lot more deeply ingrained ray tracing throughout the game world and on so many more surfaces and even characters, and so the PS5 Pro offers 2 distinct modes here. Performance Pro is a similar tale to Miles Morales. It uses PSSR to push the base PS5 fidelity mode through at 60 FPS, though again, considering that there was already enough headroom in the PS5 to already do this fidelity mode at 40 FPS, it's really no surprise that the PSSR assisted upgrade is able to look absolutely fantastic here. And then there's also a Fidelity Pro mode, and this really pushes the boat out in a few key ways, thanks to re-embracing that 30 FPS target. One thing that can be spotted is an increase in the number of pedestrians and onlookers, filling out the crowds in the opening scene as an easy touch point to go for. But there's also some beefed up ray tracing. RT reflections bump up from a half render resolution, where a 4K output would have got a 1080p reflection, to a full render resolution, though that is also accounting for any dynamic resolution scaling that's going on with the engine. For comparison, the base PS5 has that half render resolution for its fidelity mode, but then it's a quarter resolution for its performance RT mode. But there's also RT ambient occlusion, which was seen in the PC version of Rift Apart. This uses ray tracing to augment the standard AO, which is based off screen space, and that helps to add more realistic shading and shadows, contact shadows in particular, helping objects to blend together more naturally visually. There's actually a toggle for both of these settings if you have Fidelity Pro enabled and want to experiment with VRR and 120Hz display support. Reflections you can have at medium for the half rate render resolution just like Performance Pro, or high like Fidelity Pro. RT ambient occlusion is off by default in performance mode, relying on that screen space AO, whilst fidelity mode sets it for high that adds both a fully ray traced and a screen space GI bounce to really blend the techniques together. Curiously, there's also a medium setting that omits that screen space GI bounce and could have a bit of a frame rate impact, though it's far from a deal breaker. Alas, without 120Hz or VRRTV and without the ability to actually capture that, we couldn't really test this aspect out. Though doing side-by-side comparisons of screenshots is pretty difficult to spot the differences here. In fact, going back in just recently, the thing that we did spot is that there's actually a bug with Fidelity Pro once you get to the first open section with Ratchet. The reflections just aren't working at full detail. That is bound to be patched out very soon, but to be fair, Performance Pro is the way to go here, just as Performance RT was for the base game. I do think that there is a tangible benefit here to playing on PS5 with Performance RT, where you'll appreciate better the fuzzy characters that fill the cutscenes in particular, and all of the ray tracing is just the right side of flashy and in your face, that having the higher resolution reflections is going to look a little bit better. But it is still nice to have Fidelity Pro, and Insomniac really are quite masterful at having a good feeling 30 FPS game, and especially when there's almost always headroom to reach for 40 FPS as well. And so we come to Spider-Man 2 and this cascading growth and maturity of ray tracing with Insomniac games and their game engine. The studio really knocks it out of the park here, able to go all in and only offer fidelity and performance RT mode on base PS5 without having a fallback mode that omitted ray tracing. And that carries through to the PS5 Pro with a Fidelity Pro and Performance Pro mode. It's a familiar story here, with PSSR helping Performance Pro get the standard fidelity mode up to 60 FPS, while Fidelity Pro brings some additional higher quality and optional ray tracing features to the table. This higher quality mode is really able to push out the level of detail distances so much further as well, and you can see that if you go back and forth between the settings. RT Reflections from Ratchet & Clank is RT Reflections and Interiors here, because there's some black dev magic at play for rendering the rooms as skyscrapers with people and everything. Basically, there's secret rooms underneath the map that are rendered and processed with ray tracing separately outside of this world. You have medium and high settings with the half and full render resolutions respectively, though the difference is going to be pretty subtle because there's a lot of stuff to disguise this with the warping of the glass, a bit of schmutz on the glass to make them dirty and scuffed up, so that you can't really see the differences too much. And then, once again, similar to Rift Apart, there's also the 3 levels of RT ambient occlusion. This is off as in performance, medium and high as in fidelity, and it's still augmenting screen space AO instead of replacing it. The last one though is RT Key Light Shadows. This is all about the city of New York itself and calculating the sun shadows for buildings that are off in the middle to far distance and which will be most effective for when you're out and about and up high in the sky, looking in particular for a perfect spot to take a screenshot from using the game's photo mode. While going from performance to fidelity does force you to reset the checkpoint, what's nice in Fidelity Pro is that you can toggle these individual things separately without that reload, so you can really do that back-to-back comparison. Once again, these are more like tech curios, given the solid presets that are on offer and the performance that they provide. I've already talked up Insomniac's 30 FPS play here, and it still holds true, but Fidelity mode will be a great shout if you've got a 120Hz screen and maybe VRR on top of that, letting you play at 40 FPS. For the individual settings though, there seems to be always just tons of headroom in Insomniac's games, so it doesn't really make sense to turn those off even if they're a little bit optional. For the rest of us with just a 60Hz TV though, the action combat of Spider-Man will definitely make it worth sticking with Performance Pro. And while if you're in-game it does go to the full settings screen which blocks out the real world, from the main menu as you're starting a new game, you can actually do this while still showing graphics on screen, and you can see just how things toggle on and off and switch back and forth with the scenic views of the city that this gives you. Insomniac remain the absolute masters of the PS5 within PlayStation Studios. If game development is a marathon, they've been able to sprint through the slog of the first half of this generation, and it's truly impressive to see them iterate upon their game engine over and over, and also bring those tech improvements back to their games with patches. With PlayStation's games also coming to PC, where they've been able to add further ray tracing effects, it's really great to see those being folded back to the PS5 Pro. The problem for PS5 Pro though is that they already look exceptional on PS5 and with enough headroom to let people engage the optional frame rate modes to boot. Sure, there's compromises when going for the performance RT modes, such as the significantly reduced reflection resolution, but that is well enough disguised and fleeting enough not to be a detriment to the experience. PS5 Pro is basically just able to lift away a lot of those compromises, and even introduce ray tracing features that would otherwise only feature in the PC ports, which is important considering that Spider-Man 2 is coming to PC in early 2025. So on the whole, this is all thoroughly excellent stuff, but at the same time, you won't be dissatisfied still playing on PS5. That's all that we've got for this video. We've got plenty more PlayStation 5 Pro games to still dive into, so make sure to like, subscribe, share, click the bell icon to get the notifications, and all of the other usual YouTube stuff, so that hopefully we will see you again soon. Goodbye!